We've made rapid progress against cancer over the past few decades, but the prices of new cancer drugs are rising very rapidly, much faster than inflation. In this video, I will discuss some of the factors I think are driving these high drug prices and the things that I think we need to do to bring those prices down. My name is Dr. David Stewart. I'm a medical oncologist in Ottawa, Canada, and a professor of medicine at the University of Ottawa. And I recently wrote a book on cancer called A Short Primer on Why Cancer Still Sucks that is intended for patients and that it can be purchased online through Amazon Books. This is the 14th out of 16 videos I've put together to just discuss different topics that people ask me about cancer. And for additional details, you can see my book. Importantly, for your own personal health care, any advice, rely on your healthcare advisors for that advice. By 2012, the average cost for a cancer treatment in the United States had risen to over $100,000 per year, compared to less than $10,000 per year in the 1990s. Since then, it has continued to rise rapidly, and these rapidly rising costs of cancer care put pressure on governments, insurance companies, and individuals. In addition, a growing and aging population means that the number of cancer patients is increasing. Furthermore, the emergence of effective new therapies have meant that patients who could not be treated in the past now can be treated. So that also increases the total number of people that are under treatment. And at the same time, the treatments are becoming more effective, so patients are staying on treatment for a longer period of time. Several things contribute to the very high cost of new anti-cancer drugs, but the very high cost of new drug development is one very important one. These costs are rising much faster than inflation. In 1987, it took an average of about $230 million to bring a drug from discovery until approval. But by 2013, that had risen more than 12-fold to $2.9 billion. The escalation in drug development costs has been driven largely by increasingly complex regulation. The costs of complying with this regulation are very high. So the regulation is absolutely essential, but the cost of complying with it is very, very high. The cost of complying with research regulation have risen much faster than inflation, and we need to do something to bring down these costs. Once a new drug is approved, these high drug development costs need to be recouped from sales. If companies cannot recoup these costs from sales, then the company goes bankrupt. And also then other companies stop investing in new drug development, and it brings drug development to a halt. The other complicating factor is that of all drugs that enter clinical trials, all cancer drugs, fewer than 10% of them are ever approved. And so the cost of these very expensive failures also must be recouped from the very few successes. If these costs cannot be recouped, then again, companies will stop investing, progress will halt. So we need to figure out how we're going to fix this. Another factor driving high drug development costs or the high prices of drugs is personalization of therapy. In the 1990s, if one developed a new drug for lung cancer, one could then sell it to all patients for the use in all patients with lung cancer. But with personalization, only 10% of the patients might receive it because if we sell it to everybody, 90% of the patients would not benefit, 10% would. But now we have figured out more and more how to just give it to the 10% who are going to benefit. But the costs of new drug development are the same whether the drug is used in all the patients or just 10% of them. But now all the costs of drug development have to be recouped from a much smaller patient population that will ultimately be treated with the drug. Another important factor is that it usually takes on average 12 to 15 years to take a drug from discovery to approval. But the patent life is only 20 years. So that once a drug is approved, then the full cost of drug development has to be recouped just in the remaining 5 to 8 years. Another factor is that there are a number of issues that distort market forces. In a perfect capitalist society, different companies would compete with each other based on price, and this would bring prices down. But that's not what is happening with drugs. Instead, what happens is that one company may test the market by setting the highest ever price for a drug. Other companies see that that company got away with it, so they then increase the price for their drugs as well. When companies do compete with each other, they usually do not compete based on price. Competition is also decreased because there are just a few large companies dominating the market. If a small company develops an effective new drug, typically that small company will be bought by a large company, and that keeps the total number of companies small, and this decreases competition. The United States has the world's highest drug prices. And this is partly because of the fact that in 2003, there was legislation enacted saying that it was illegal for Medicare to negotiate price with a drug company. The law stated that the drug company could set whatever price they wanted to, and Medicare then had to pay that price. There have only very recently been changes to this to start so that Medicare will start negotiating prices with drug companies. In the United States, the pharmaceutical industry also spends more than $1 billion a year on lobbying and on political contributions. Therefore, American politicians have a vested interest in keeping drug prices high. Once a drug's patent expires, then hypothetically, the generic companies could bring out a generic form at a lower price. But this has not worked all that effectively for most cancer drugs because, for example, one of the things that will happen is a brand name company may actually pay a generic company to hold its drug off the market. So instead of the generic company making money by selling the drug, they make money by not selling it because a brand name company pays them not to sell it. And this keeps the cost of the drug high. Costs are also driven up by a number of other factors, such as intermediaries. So a wholesaler will buy the drug from a drug company and then sell to pharmacies and hospitals, and the wholesaler takes a cut as well. So that this again helps drive up already very high prices. Prices are also kept high by the fact that there is very little importing of drugs from other countries. In 2016, in his 2016 presidency, Donald Trump did pass an executive order saying that Americans could import cheaper drugs from Canada. But then the Canadian government said that they would put in place export restrictions because if Canada has a much smaller population than the United States, and if most of Canada's drugs start going down to the United States, then there's a shortage of drugs for Canadians, and Canadians have to pay much higher drug prices. So the Canadian government would not go along with this. So there are various other factors as well that limit the ability of countries to import drugs from other countries to keep drug prices low. So what are the solutions? So there have been different things suggested. So that one is that governments actually set value-based prices for drugs, that there's actual government price fixing. The other is that governments do things to fix the things that distort market forces. With respect to deciding on what the value is of a drug, there's a lot of disagreement on that. Different people look at different things. And so it's very difficult to find agreement on what the true value of a drug would be. The other thing also is if governments set drug prices, what the economists have told us is if governments set prices, then what that does is it actually ends up backfiring in the majority of cases. In fact, prices will actually end up going up instead of down because of the things that happen. So, for example, if governments set prices, then you get shortages of drugs. So companies stop producing the drug or product or whatever else it is. So the government may guarantee a low price, but there's no drug to be bought because of the fact that the companies will no longer sell it because of the low price that governments have set. On the other hand, governments could potentially do a better job of tackling the factors that distort market forces. But one of the most important things, as I mentioned earlier in this video and in a previous video, if we really want to tackle the high prices of drugs, we need to tackle the high cost of new drug development. The cost of new drug development is much too high. It's very inefficient, and the drugs cannot be developed unless those costs are recouped. And so if we really want drug prices to come down, we have to do something about the very high cost of new drug development. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is the same things that drive up the cost of new drug development also delay new drug development. So they delay access to effective new drugs. So there are huge advantages in tackling the very high cost of new drug development. So some people have said that by my advocating that we bring down the cost of new drug development, that's just caving into the pharmaceutical industry, that we're giving into the pharmaceutical industry. But from my perspective, there's no way these prices can come down no matter what we do unless we bring down the cost of new drug development. So in fact, it's something that we all need. All parts of society need for this to happen if we want to get access to less expensive drugs. And again, just bringing down the cost of new drug development, of course, would not do it. The government at the same time would need to tackle the things that distort market forces. But just tackling the things that distorting market forces would not do the job, because then if the cost of new drug development cannot be recouped, then companies just stop investing in new drug development. So overall, again, we've been making rapid progress against cancer over the last number of years. And this has been driven by research. But research requires investment. That investment is threatened if the cost of new drug development is too high. Only because if governments and insurance companies stop buying new drugs because the price is too high, then there is no money flowing into companies for them to invest in other new drugs. And that is a major threat to progress. So the cost of new drug development is problematic, but there are many ways that we can tackle it, that we can fix it without jeopardizing patient safety or data integrity or patient rights. So on this and other aspects of cancer, again, see my book, A Short Primer on Why Cancer Still Sucks, that can be purchased online through Amazon Books. So I hope that you found this video helpful.